So hello everyone. So this is the third part of this mini seminar on scientific writing. We're going to have a look at what we discussed last week. That is the structure of the introduction, especially with regards to the topic and terminator sentences. I asked two students to show examples. These students are a bit more advanced than most others as they're already working on a paper. I had several manuscripts I commented on. They all looked compared to last week quite advanced, but there are some general patterns, like kind of always, which I would like to quickly discuss before we go to the examples. Now where am I? Two screens, it's sometimes more difficult. Okay. So the structure in principle is like this. We have a topic sentence that introduces the topic which you were supposed to write. And then the terminator sentence tells us what is the conclusion from this paragraph. So the topic introduces the topic, something we want to talk about, and then we have some conclusion or general statement. And in between, what is missing so far are the examples and explanations. And then starts the next paragraph. What is important and what you can now check from your written structure is the topic of the next paragraph. So this actually should be second. The topic of the next paragraph should be mentioned in the terminator sentence of the previous paragraph. Like this, you will get a good flow through the reading. So something comes out of a conclusion from the first paragraph, and then this, what is important here, will become the topic of the next paragraph. So in the two examples, the students are asked to present, they will first read to us their topic and terminator sentences. We will just listen and see whether it makes sense. And then we will double check whether this is the case, that there's a proper flow from what I just said before. Another point that became obvious in most, if not all, of the manuscripts is, like what I said before in the introduction, you have to focus really on the topics that are of interest for the reader. And of interest for the reader is what you have done new, what you contribute to science in any way. And this is normally related to data that you have collected. So in the introduction, you should not bring up topics to which you cannot say anything new. For example, when you have a paper on potential alternative reproductive tactics, then it would be interesting to know which one have higher or lower fitness. But if you did not measure fitness, then you should not mention this in the introduction. You might then later in the discussion discuss your results which relate what this might possibly mean for fitness in a future study, but don't bring it up in the introduction. The problem is topics you bring up in the introduction, the reader expects that you will deal with these topics and that you will provide answers to these topics. So if you don't have data and you don't have answers to this, then don't mention it. It might still become important, like I said, later in the discussion, but try to avoid this in the introduction. And on the other hand, of course, everything that you have measured in your study should also be mentioned in the introduction, and typically every aspect that you measure will have one paragraph. And important is that you use in this paragraph the same words like you use in your results. So if you measured reproductive success by doing paternity analysis, then talk about paternity in the introduction and not about something else. And the last point that is obvious in most of the manuscripts is, in school, typically we learn to write nicely and to write diverse. So we use different words for the same thing, so it's not always the same. But in scientific writing, it's rather the opposite. Therefore, one topic, you should always use the same identical word and don't use different words for the same thing. Otherwise, your scientific colleagues will think it is something different, because if there's if you study one thing, let's say you study some strategies, then always call it strategy. Don't call it sometimes strategy, and other times tactic, and other times behavior. For the same thing, always use the same term so people know you're still talking about exactly the same thing, even though this is in contrast to what you have learned in school. But it is very important. Or another example we had is if you study variability in social systems, talk about variability. Don't use then diversity or some other terms, because then people might think, okay, maybe diversity is not exactly the same like variability. What is the difference? So always use the same terms, and also always try to write sentences that are short and easy to understand and down to the point, so people don't have to think about what do you probably mean, but that it's written there plain and simple to easily understand. Good. With this, I would then like, oops, I can't see you guys anymore. I would like to ask Standive if she could share her screen with us, and we could go through the structure of her introduction, and only looking at the topic and the terminator sentences.
Okay, I'll share my screen. Which one is it? Okay, so this is just copied from the last version that we had.
Okay, so then maybe everyone else is closing their eyes, and you just read to us clearly only the yellow topic and the blue terminator sentences, and we try to figure out whether we know what the story is about.
Okay, so the social organization of a species describes the relationships and social interactions between individuals which influence the composition of groups. Animals exhibit great diversity in social organization, ranging from solitary species to species which form complex societies. Variation in the social organization is also prevalent within species, largely as a consequence of environmental variability. Individuals may choose a social and reproductive tactic with the highest fitness, depending on ecological conditions. Alternative reproductive tactics occur where investment in reproduction can be exploited by competitors of the same sex, such that high reproductive competition leads to the evolution of alternative tactics to obtain reproductive success, especially for less competitive males. Importantly, different mechanisms may lead to the existence of arts within a species. Social flexibility is thought to be an important mechanism by which arts can arise. Whether they arise by environmental disruptors or by social flexibility, arts are an important adaptation to unpredictably changing conditions, environmental conditions, allowing individuals to switch back and forth between group and solitary living and different reproductive tactics depending on prevailing environmental conditions. One species where so far 3 arts in males have been described is the socially flexible African striped mouse, Rhabdomus pumilio, from the semi-arid succulent Karoo. Here we describe for the first time a 4th male tactic in which males live in all male groups, so-called bachelor groups. So that is the flow.
Okay, and then of course, still read to us the last paragraph, the aims of the study.
Oh, okay, so I should read the last paragraph. That's a different.
Oh, you don't have it here.
Okay, the aim of our study was to determine the origin and function of bachelor groups in the African striped mouse, especially whether they represent an alternative reproductive tactic. We expected to identify 2 types of bachelor males cooperating in social thermoregulation. 1, bachelor groups due to environmental disruptors, that is, cases where all female group members have disappeared, most likely due to predation, leaving the small phylopatric males and the breeding males, and 2, bachelor groups consisting of unrelated roaming males originating from different groups. If most bachelor males represent an art, we hypothesized that they would be scrotal, that is sexually mature, and occur mainly during the breeding season, indicating that they are the result of reproductive competition. We further predicted males of unrelated bachelor groups, but not of bachelor groups arising from environmental disruptors, to be more competitive than phylopatric males, but less competitive than breeding males and similar to roaming males. Finally, we expected bachelor males to switch to the roaming or breeding tactic when the body mass increased, indicating an increase in competitiveness.
Okay, so I mean, we have to ask the other ones, as I of course know the study. Was it kind of clear to you? Was there a good flow that you understood from only the topic and terminator sentences what the study is about? You can speak freely. I mean, we're here to help each other. If it was not clear, then and you can point out where, then it will help.
I thought it was very coherent, and it was very efficiently written in terms of sentences not being too long. It was straight to the point, and there was nothing to interpret from it because it was well put together.
Any other opinion? Was there anything that came up all of a sudden where you thought, oops, why is this now mentioned? Or that this always indicates there's a break in the flow?
I didn't find there to be any breaks. Anyways, I thought it was it flowed excellently.
I mean, the one break that was there is that in the last paragraph with the aims, we talk about social thermoregulation, while it does not occur anywhere before in the topic or terminator sentences. That's again, I mean, we put it in some examples in between, but it was again becoming evident that this is somehow not flowing nicely. We can still go through it. Sandeep, can you please share the screen with us again, and we check whether the topic of the second, third, fourth paragraph becomes clear from the terminator of the paragraph before?
Okay. Okay.
So
in blue here we have the terminator sentences.
So what is the topic of the in the second paragraph? Variation in social organization.
Yes.
And is this in the terminator of the sentence before?
Well, yes, in a way.
So what should be changed?
Maybe I can put that they show great variation in social organization instead of maybe saying that there's great diversity in the terminator sentence.
Exactly. I would change diversity to variation. Then it's more clear how this is related. Of course, in this case, it's not exactly the same between species, but we're interested in variation. And if you change diversity to variation, then it becomes the flow becomes kind of better.
Yeah.
And the next one.
In the third paragraph, I start off talking about the alternative reproductive tactics. And I think there's, in the second paragraph, I'm talking about individuals choosing social and reproductive tactics with the highest fitness, depending on ecological conditions.
Yes, I think that's good. I mean, theoretically, one could delete social tactics out of the second paragraph, but I want to keep it because as long as we don't know whether bachelors have reproductive success, it might not be a reproductive tactic. Then we go to the next paragraph.
And so the fourth paragraph is now talking about the mechanisms that the arts are arising. And in the third paragraph, I talk about, well, it's a short sentence saying that there are different mechanisms that lead to the existence of arts within a species. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I find a better way to put this.
No, I think it's okay. It's different mechanisms. And then in the next topic, one mechanism is social flexibility. So the mechanism is the topic, which comes from the terminator sentence before, and the social flexibility is the news of the sentence. Remember, every sentence has always a topic and the news. So the topic here is mechanism, and the news is social flexibility. And then the environmental disruptors, of course, you won't mention this in the topic sentence, but later.
Yeah.
One thing that comes a bit clear here is, I think only comes clear to me now, we have to see with the writing whether we put social flexibility and environmental disruptors in one paragraph or we make two out of it. But I would keep it for one now because it's already quite long.
Yeah.
Good, then the next paragraph.
So now I start to specifically focus on our model species. And I say that one species where arts have been described in males is a socially flexible African striped mouse. And in the terminator sentence, I'm talking also about arts arising by social flexibility or environmental disruptors.
Yeah. Good. Now I think that is good. Can you go up again? I was also not. I was only the second last paragraph with the very long terminator sentence.
Okay.
Arts are important adaptation. I think in this last terminator sentence you can delete allowing individuals to switch back and forth. Blah blah blah. It makes the sentence too long. And most likely, if you later include examples between topic and terminator sentence, it will be said in the paragraph. But here it makes it a sentence. You see it when you just look at it, the sentence is double as long like all the other sentences. So it's too much information.
Yeah.
Has anyone, we're not so many people, so if you have something to add or to tell us to improve, you can just start talking. We're only 8 or how many are we? Some or 10. Is there something else from the other students you would like to comment or suggest to improve? Maybe go slowly from the very top again down, and if somebody has something, then just start talking.
Maybe the paragraph on alternative reproductive techniques, the first line can be split into two, the topic sentence, or I don't know, like it's a little long.
You say it's too long?
Which sentence? This one. I don't know if my pointer is working.
Yes, it's a bit too long. I mean, and it says twice alternative reproductive tactic within the same sentence.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, that's a good one.
So maybe alternative reproductive tactics. Yeah. Actually, I think you might have to change the entire sentence and give a definition what alternative reproductive tactics are. And the two arguments you make then in this sentence, bring it instead as the explanations and examples in this paragraph, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So alternative reproductives are discontinuous ways for individuals, typically males, to reach reproductive success. Then that's the topic sentence, and then you can bring these two arguments about the evolution. And important will also be here. I didn't read what is written in between. It can be here that that there will be the example that it can depend on competitiveness measured, especially like male body mass, because male body mass later occurs in the predictions in the last paragraph.
Yeah.
Good. Can you then also still show us, if you have it at your hand, the last paragraph with the aims of the study?
Okay. Good. So I have not looked at this one or changed some of the, I cleaned it up with some comments are still here. I've not really read it through very well, but
I think this paragraph is quite good. What one of course must take care of is that topics that occur here will later also be in the introduction, like social thermoregulation. What I talked about, body mass. Where's this? We only talk about competitiveness here. I must have changed this. Huh? So I don't know why I changed this, but instead to say to be more competitive, we should, and this is the true voice for all the studies, we should mention what we really measured, and what we measured was body mass.
yeah.
So instead of interpreting the results, one should state what we really did, and that was to measure body mass. We didn't measure competitiveness directly. And this will also be in this paragraph about arts that we just discussed.
Yeah.
Anybody else has any comments here or questions? I mean, if there's something not clear that then you tell us this, then you will help us quite a lot. This is, yeah.
Can I just make a comment on where it says bachelor groups due to environmental disruptors, cases where all female group members disappeared, and then I just feel like the most likely due to predation is speculative, and it shouldn't be in the aims. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but is this referring to what was later found out in the study, that predation was a contributing factor? Because I would omit that from aims personally. I don't know.
Yes, I think you're right. We can delete this most likely to predation. This is not needed here, and it's speculative. I mean, it's probably the case, but we don't know, so we don't have to mention why they disappeared. That's right. To take this out will avoid one possible comment. Okay, thank you, Standive. Then we will make the second exercise with the manuscript from Loreen. If you can share your screen and read it to us, please. I would just come back to Anne-Sophie. Where did we mention different environmental conditions? Where did we mention this, Dandive?
Sorry, different environmental conditions about?
Yeah, I saw this just in the chat that Anne-Sophie wrote in your paper. Are you working with different environmental conditions? Because you mentioned it in the intro.
We do mention it with social flexibility that individuals are changing groups or tactics depending on the prevailing or different environmental conditions.
Yes, and actually, now that Anne-Sophie mentions this, that we have to put this into the aims. I mean, the environmental conditions that we are looking at mainly is population density.
Yes.
So this has to be added to the aims for the environment. And this will, of course, also be mentioned in the paragraph on the striped mice. That this is the most important, apart from the seasonality, which we also mentioned, is the most important aspect determining their social organization. Okay, but then we move on to Laureen.
Yes, I just say that I didn't do a good presentation as it was just done. So it would be less simpler. So I'm doing a methodological article and it's about maternal investment of sea turtle. So maternal investment of marine turtle has a significant impact on population dynamics. Thus, maternal investment of nesting marine turtle is a key indicator of the status of a population as well as its future, justifying the importance of its estimation. Estimating the maternal investment of endangered sea turtle requires rigorous monitoring of their reproductive outcomes, meaning clutch frequency and number of eggs laid. Therefore, there is still a crucial need to develop efficient method to remotely record reproductive outcomes of sea turtle. An accelerometer is a sensor which can provide information about the body movement and postures of animals to which it is attached. This method could be a valuable contribution to population monitoring by indicating when and how many times an equipped sea turtle nests through the breeding period. And the aim of this study was to develop a remote method to precisely record the reproductive output of sea turtles. And finally, we also tested whether it is possible to estimate the number of eggs laid from the acceleration signal. And that's it.
Good. For me, that is very clear. Is it clear to the others, or was there somewhere something where I said, oops, what is this now? I mean, that's why we read it, because if there is something like this, then we realize it. The only thing I have to say again is I think this paper could be more general, and that means not start with sea turtles immediately. So that might make it more interesting for a broader audience. I always recommend to put the study species as late as possible. That's but this, of course, it always depends also to which journal you want to submit it. If you send it to a journal of sea turtle biology, or I think you aim for +1, then probably it doesn't matter too much. But if you want to send it to a more general one, then it would be better.
Yeah, but I think I'm going to add one paragraph with the first one more general.
The only thing that came to my mind, but I don't know whether it will come to the mind of other people, is, and I don't know if it's relevant here, is how with sea turtles, normally you see them when they're on land already lying clutches. So it's not clear. And so, you somehow have to get the accelerator back, and that's when you get them back, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's why it's difficult to, yeah, it would be nice if we can put the accelerometer at the beginning and then to be sure to not miss the turtle when she come back at the end. But we never know exactly how many times she will come to nest. So it's a tricky part. But we also working with Argos logger, which is more like with satellite. And now if we succeed in implement the VNet and all of this in the Argos, we wouldn't need anymore to get back the logger, but it's very far.
But I mean, here you already have data. The study is kind of finished, isn't it?
Yes, we have data for the method, but for the application, we still don't have data during the entire breeding season.
Okay, but at least what you could maybe mention in the introduction somewhere, but maybe this is ridiculous because people would know how it goes, and they can say something about that they are long lasting. I don't know how long they can collect data. Is this for 3 months?
With the accelerometer?
Yeah. For how many?
It depends of the memory, but it can be long. It can be 2 months. It can be 3 months.
Okay. Good. So then we also go through the topic sentences and see how they relate to the terminator of the previous paragraph. So the second paragraph, the topic is nocturnal investment of sea turtles.
The second paragraph, I would say the topic is there.
Yes. And it's also in the terminator sentence before. Good. Then we go to the next.
I would say the topic is there, but it is not very clear from the previous paragraph. But there is efficient method.
I mean, efficient method to remotely record reproductive outcome is accelerometer. So, I mean, you could rephrase the topic sentence to an efficient method to remotely record behavior is provided by accelerometers attached to individuals, for example.
Okay.
Then it would be more clear the connection. Then we go to the next paragraph.
But it's
That's the aims already. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a short short introduction.
Yeah, but it's still, but the shorter the better. And I mean, it's clear. I would say there's no surprises here. Yeah. Anybody else has some comments here? Some suggestions? Good. Then, I mean, we don't have time here to go through really all the introductions you wrote, but the general points I made at the beginning. And then all the others, I would simply recommend, and after the seminar, go through the topic and terminator sentences you have now and check yourself whether, and I commented on several of your manuscripts, whether the topic in your topic sentence relates to the terminator sentence of the paragraph before, to make it flow nicely. Good. Anybody has some comments here or questions from the introduction before I move to the abstract? Doesn't look like it. So I don't know what is happening today with my mouse pointer. Where am I? Yeah. So this presentation, I don't know, you see yourself, this presentation I show here is a modified version of something that Tim Clattenbrock had been shown a long time ago in Zurich, but I changed it quite a bit. So why are abstracts important? There are many reasons, because most journals, especially the high-ranking ones, reject 80% of their submitted papers on the abstract alone, because the abstract is the first thing the editor will read. It's also the first thing the referee will read, and it doesn't matter whether it's a referee for a paper or also if it's the referee for a proposal for funding that you submitted somewhere. So if you make a good impression in the abstract, the first impression is always very important, then it will hold for the rest. And if you make a confused or non-precise or not good impression, then you have from the beginning a better chance of getting success. And the abstract is the only thing that most readers will read. Most people, when they look up for papers, in the meantime, these days, they only read the abstract and not much more. So you have to be precise there. This is also one technique which I didn't mention so far, but I will mention in the discussion, can already mention here. When you write a paper, one good exercise is that you write down separately on top a minimum of 1 up to 3 statements how you would like your paper to be cited. For example, Canile et al. Showed that bachelor groups can come into existence by different mechanisms, flexibility, or environmental disruptors. Parenthesis, Canile et al. 2021. Then you make 1 to 3 statements. You think that paper would be great if it's cited like this. And then you have to make sure that these statements can be taken from the abstract. In the end, we publish papers because you want other people to read it, to learn something, and to cite them. So thinking about how your paper could be cited will help you to write it in a way that people see these statements and then will also see the importance of it, what you think is important, and cite it like that. We will talk about this again when we talk about the discussion in 2 weeks. Then third, because abstracts show us whether the paper we have just written needs rewriting, because if the paper we wrote is not clear, so we come to a confused abstract, it shows us the paper is not clear. And this is the reason why when a study is finished, I always prefer to write the abstract first, because in the abstract, one has to be clear, one has to be precise, what is the study about, and then it also helps one how to structure the entire manuscript. Because the problem is always, if it's a student or researcher, we have too many data, too many ideas, what it all means. We have to learn to focus on the significance and to leave the rest out. And by writing a good abstract that focuses on the significance, it will then also help us to keep the other things that are distracting or that are not very clear out of the manuscript. Then, because abstracts provide practice for structuring longer arguments, it's again the same point. This is like what I said before. If you can make a sentence, I don't know, Loreen showed in her study that accelerometers are great to measure not only how many clutches, but even how many eggs sea turtles are laying. Then you have in a very short sentence the complex argument that you want to make, and that might help you also to phrase it better and more precisely within the main text. And because abstracts help us to identify good science, does the novelty strike you? Do they read like an express train? In other words, if the abstract is boring, then nobody will bother to read the rest of your manuscript. So how to structure an abstract? Readers are like fish. You need to catch their interest. You need a bait. That's the first sentence. The first sentence should read in a way that they think, oh, it's interesting, that study. Then when the readers are attracted, you have to hook them. First, you have to make them interested, like a fish who's going for the worm, but then he also has to take it. And then one has to strike it and to wrap it up. To wrap it up means to make it citable. And abstracts should have only 4 main sentences. And you will, for example, see in all the very high-ranking journals like Current Biology or Science, Nature, often the abstracts can be very short. And this is why you really have to learn how to focus on these 4 sentences. And in the meantime, I always write my abstracts first with these 4 sentences to make it clear, and then add the rest afterwards. And how much you add then depends on the journal. Like when you publish in Journal of Animal Ecology, it's a journal which, and I think that's important, they want to have quite detail on the methods. Then you can add a lot of details on the methods. But if you write for another journal, they might not want a lot of methods, then the abstracts might be quite shorter. And in the instructions for authors, they typically tell you how long it can be. It's normally something between either 200, 250 or 300 words, depending on the journal. So the first sentence is debate, often a multi-provocative proposition or generalization, like it is often suggested that the evolutionary lines leading to humans and apes diverged in the late Pliocene. So this is a general statement. So when you're interested in human evolution, you will think, okay, that's an interesting study. And it's provocative because the term it's often suggested already indicates that maybe the authors of this study have another opinion or have data that are opposing this generalized opinion. The second sentence, the hook, often no problem or limitation with the previous sentence. So the hook should not be not much is known about, but it should be a hook in the way that what is known is actually not good enough or maybe even wrong. So the example here was, however, some primate fossils from the Middle Miocene of Europe lack any of the traits thought to be shared by the common ancestor. So this is in opposition to the first general statement. Then the third sentence is the strike. Now comes something that is new, which is why it's worth to publish this paper. It describes the core result of the paper in general terms. If you have space for a longer abstract, you can bring not only one result, but something like 3 results. But also important is you do not have to bring all the results you have. Focus here on the ones that are important. And these are typically the ones for which the paper will later be cited. You might have additional results to support your main conclusions, but this will then be sufficient to be in the main text. Doesn't have to be in the abstract. So here the text would be, here we describe anthropoid fossils from late Miocene deposits in Iceland that show all 3 traits characteristic of hominids, those of the sectorial premolar complex, enlarged brain size, and pelvic adaptations indicative of upright carriage. And if you have a journal where you have lots of space, you might have bring 1, 2, 3 sentences for the 3 results, and then this sentence only as the summary of the results altogether. And the last sentence, the wrap-up, they should spell out the general relevance of what you've discovered. It should be a take-home message. So the presence of advanced hominids in Iceland during the late Miocene suggests that Northern Europe rather than Africa may have been the primary center of human evolution and emphasizes the need for an extensive revision of human phylogeny. So the last sentence should really be a take-home message. It should really become clear from this last sentence that this study is worthwhile to be published because there's something new that was found. It's important to stress that this news doesn't have to be always magic. Not every paper you write will be a Nature Science paper. But it's important to show that it is something new, even if it's something small. And if it's something small, then don't overemphasize it, because many papers are rejected because people want to explain the entire world with a very small result. But also don't be too shy. If you have an abstract that's ending with, we suggest we need further studies to understand the biology of striped mice, marine turtles, and European pond turtles, then this sentence is pointless. Don't end your abstract with a sentence which you can write even if you wouldn't have done the study. A sentence that's always true is not worthwhile to be the end of the abstract. So always avoid at the end of the abstract, at the end of the discussion, sentences that you could have written without your study at all. These sentences are useless. So for your study, for your paper, your report, your first version of the abstract should consist of only these 4 sentences. And once you have this, then you can read them, and it should read well. And if you read it to a colleague or friend or to us, it should be clear what is the story and why it's interesting and what do we know new now. And I always mark these first 4 sentences in red, and then later I add to this depending on the journal where it's supposed to be submitted. And some journals allow for more, some for less space. And this is then also the homework you should do for next week, to write these 4 sentences, but then you can already expand on them and add sentences in between. But the 4 sentences should become visible. So then the abstract, depending on the journal, like in our case, it could be, in my research field, it could be Animal Behavior, Journal of Animal Ecology, or Journal of Mammalogy. They allow for much more than 4 sentences. And in general, for every part of a paper, one can have 1 to 2 sentences, one for the introduction of the topic. That would be one part. So that is the topic sentence of the study. Then stating the problem, hypothesis, predictions. Then the methods, where it was done, with what species, experimental design, then the main results 1 and 2, and maybe 3. Don't bring all the results, like I said, only the most clear and important ones. The rest comes in the main text, the discussion, and the take-home message, which is only 1 sentence. So 1 and 9, of course, is always only 1 sentence. And like I said here, do not make statements that are true for every study, or don't say at the end of the abstract that you will discuss your results, because obviously you will discuss them. I mean, it's a scientific paper, so that's obvious, but still one quite too often reads it. So the length of the abstract, like I said, depends on the journal. But in general, the clearer your study is, the less space you need. So even if the journal allows you 250 words, it's better to try to get a shorter abstract. It's only if you, let's say you try to get a paper into current biology, but you have only 50 words allowed and they reject it, then you send it to Animal Behavior and it still has only 50 words, then the people will know your paper got rejected at another journal and you were even too lazy to adapt your abstract now to the style of the journal where you are at the moment submitting to. So the approach I suggest is make first your 4 sentences, then extend to 2 sentences per part to a maximum of 250 words. It's a typical length of a high-ranking journal. High-ranking here means something like Animal Behavior, Journal Animal Ecology. And if your journal or university, when you write a master thesis, allows for more space, then you can add additional important information. So the homework will be to write your 4 sentence abstracts in red and then extend it in blue to up to 2 sentences per part, a maximum of 250 words. And so when after the 2 sentences per part, you still have space and you think something is missing, you can then add additional information in flag. And you will realize when you do this approach, when you just write the abstract, like what comes to your mind, it will get very long. But when you do this approach, then often you don't even need the black part, because you learn how to write very precisely to the point what's important with the 4 red sentences. Then you see, okay, I would like to add something here and there in blue, but then you don't, then you're done normally. Then you have achieved the aim and you don't need to blow it up even more. I bring here one example that is from the manuscript that in the meantime has been published, and I also showed the structure of the introduction. Actually, I should have, there's one. I should have made this different so one can see it better. Let me quickly do that. So these are the 4 sentences. So intraspecific variation in social systems, if so, has often been suggested to be an adaptation of varying environments. So the topic, which I hope some people find interesting, is intraspecific variation. However, so now comes a contrast. So far, only variation in time, but not in space, has been studied in relation to IFSO. Here, we show that African striped mice showed IFSO over 8 subpopulations studied at the same time, with the more striped mice following the optimal tactic of solitary breeding, the lower the population density was. So that's the strike, the main result, and the conclusion. As striped mice are known to disperse over unoccupied habitat between these 8 subpopulations, geographic variation in population density makes IFSO adaptive, allowing individuals to adapt quickly to the prevailing conditions. So I think with these 4 sentences alone, it is clear what is the study about, what are the main results, and also what the paper could be cited for. It could be cited for that IFSO occurs with relation to geographic variation in population density. And then for the paper, I added some sentences in blue to have more information. But after I added these blue sentences, there was actually, for me, I didn't have the urge to add black sentences as well, because for me, the abstract like this included everything that was necessary. So homework for next week is to write your abstract and also to work through your comments for the introduction, and then you can, in the introduction, when you now have the topic sentence and the terminator sentence, fill in the space in between with examples and explanations how you come to the conclusion in your terminator sentence for the topic that you have introduced. Good. Are there any? With this, we are finished.